we can continue into the next talk with Korbinian Eckstein. Korbinian is a PhD student at the Technische Universität Wien, and he will provide a talk on using Visual Studio Code effectively and some other cool extensions. Korbinian is an MRI researcher with a strong focus on developing software tools for the scientific community. As a freelance contractor, he gets to work on different projects, providing both open source and project-specific software solutions. And some of his recent projects include face imaging, spectroscopy, on-scanner implementations, software container solutions, GitHub action workflows, and writing Visual Studio Code image visualization extension, Nivu VS Code. He also specializes in Julia programming, which he enjoys using for algorithmic development, especially for performance critical tasks. As a Visual Studio user myself, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So yeah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I will be sharing my screen. That works. There must have slipped some slightly old information in there because I finished my PhD and the first postdoc in Brisbane, and I'm now a freelance software engineer, kind of working together with universities.
Sorry, my bad.
Probably I had some wrong line in there. Okay, so the talk will be about, thank you for the introduction. I guess you know what the talk will be about. So let's start right away. First with what is VS Code? So a lot of you, I guess, use Visual Studio Code, and it was developed by Microsoft. It's a lightweight and open source code editor. It's fast and responsive, and it supports a lot of programming languages because it is very extensible. So it's easy for people to add new features to it. And I guess that's why it's so popular. So this slide shows a poll from Stack Overflow survey, and they found out in 2023 that over 70% of the people were using Visual Studio Code. They might have been using multiple editors, but Visual Studio Code was by far the most popular. And there are different ways to run Visual Studio Code. So there's the official desktop app. I think most people are using either for Linux, Windows, or Mac. And then there's an open source version, VS Codium. It's basically the same, but it doesn't contain the Microsoft login and telemetry features. And there's some extensions are not compatible, but a lot of them are. And then there's VS Code for Web. And I think I will quickly show VS Code for Web here, which I think is sometimes quite useful. So here's a Git repository, and just on GitHub. And if you press the dot key on your keyboard, then you will be taken to github.dev, and VS Code Web will open for you. So it's basically the same interface as the normal VS Code, and you can browse the repository that's hosted on GitHub. So that's quite convenient. I use it a lot when looking at repositories on GitHub. Then going back to the slides. Here. Okay. So what I want to show today is kind of basic text editing with Visual Studio Code, what could make you more effective, for example, and how to navigate around in VS Code, and then to show some extensions, kind of the extensions I most like using, and I think make it efficient. So with that, let's switch to a Visual Studio Code window. This one. So I think I have to range around my screen a little bit, sorry. Okay. With that, I think the most important starting point in Visual Studio Code is kind of this top search bar there. Or it's quite straightforward to use Visual Studio Code, I would say. Nearly everything can be done by point and click. So you find, you have your folder structure on the left. you find what you want to look at, you can click at things. So it's quite simple to get started. And for the slightly more advanced things, you can click on the top bar, which is a search field. It already shows there's commands that you can use. You can go to a file, open a file, or run different commands, and then a bunch of other things you could do. And kind of when first trying something here, there's also a shortcut to use later on. So if you use a function often, it might be helpful to learn the shortcut to be faster next time. So what I want to start first is here, show and run a command. Then you could search for example, I prefer the dark theme. So color themes, and then I can change the theme to the find one I like. So let's stick with the dark theme for now. Or I remembered that it's Control-Shift-P to open this panel. Then maybe it's better to zoom in a little so it's better visible for you people. And okay. So next thing, I want to open a file, and here, if nothing's opened, you see some of the most useful shortcuts already. So I press Control-P, then I can open a file. For example, I want to open the README file. I have to type only some part of it, press Enter, and the file is opened. And here in the file, I want to show some of the nice text editing features. So if I'm in a line and I want to comment out this line, that works. Yeah, I could write here, search for the, I'm always pressing Control-P, Control-Shift-P, so I'm in this command palette. And then I can type, for example, comment, and I see the different commands available there. So add line comment, and I can remember the shortcut. So now this line is commented, and from now on, I can use the shortcut to quickly comment and comment and uncomment lines. Or if I select multiple lines, comment multiple at once with the same shortcut. So that's already quite convenient. And as you can see, it does the commenting adjusted to that it's a README file. So it recognizes the type of file if you have the proper extension, and it will do the comment properly. Then going to the next thing I really like is multiple cursors. That might not be for everyone, but I like it a lot. So I can click somewhere, then hold down the Alt key, click at the different place and another place. So now I have 4 cursors, which move together synchronously when I do something. So I can type at all these cursors at the same time. Doesn't make a lot of sense what I typed, so I go back. And another thing with these multiple cursors, so again, hitting the command palette and looking for cursors, there's add cursor below. So if I press that, or remember the command for it, Control Alt down arrow, I get now 2 cursors. Or I can do many in many lines. So I have a lot of different cursors, and I can add more, can write something which should go to the beginning of all these lines. Quite convenient in some cases if having script files or something with repeated lines. Then one last thing with multiple cursors. There's the command Control-D, and that selects the whole word that where your cursor is at. So if I press Control-D, the word is selected. If I press it multiple times, the next occurrences are selected as well. And I have multiple cursors to work with. So also a quite nice feature. Already the first step of selecting one word to copy it, it's just Control-D and you have the whole word, you can copy it and paste it somewhere. So quite convenient for me. And that's kind of it with the most important list. Okay, now there's 2 more. So what you can do in normal text editors, or mostly is selecting a line, pressing Control-X, so you cut the whole line. You can copy it somewhere else. But there's also a shorter way to do that. You don't have to select the whole line. You can just press Control-X, the line is gone, and you can paste it somewhere else. So without having to select the whole line with your mouse. Because like everything what you you adjust it to do with your keyboard, you're slightly faster than first reaching to the mouse and things. So Visual Studio Code makes this process quite simple, that you can easily transition from using the mouse for everything to using the keyboard more and more. And this also works with Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste at a different place. There's also Control-L. I'm not using that myself, but you can, by repeatedly pressing, highlight multiple lines. Okay, I think now it is. That's it with the text editing features I wanted to show. So then about navigating VS Code. We already had this Control-P to open a file. It's quite convenient. So let's open another file, simple.py, which is in the repository I've opened. And to you can also use the up and down arrows to select a different file of the recently opened ones, quite convenient. And what I really like is you can write, it says it here already in the text, you can append it with a colon to go to a line number. So if I write just the colon and 100, it will jump to line 100, which is really nice, I think. Or jumping back to line 50. Or opening another file like, oops, that's funky, like simple.py, then the colon, and I want to jump to line 5. Then I'm in this file at line 5. So quite quick and straightforward to move to different places. So along this line, the next thing, I'm pressing now with the mouse here, and there's these different options. For example, search, go to symbol. That's also quite convenient. So if I write the @ symbol, then it shows all the Python symbols that it recognized. For example, the main function and the different variables which are there. And you can jump to them. So especially for longer files, that's quite convenient. It of course works also with just pressing Control-P to get the search bar open and typing the @ manually. Okay, and then if you have the proper extension for your language loaded, it also has all the language features, like you can Control-click on something and it goes to the definition. So here it's not very far apart, but it jumps to where this variable is defined. Might be even in another file. So Control-clicking is always a nice thing to do. It probably works on something like sys here as well. Yes, and now you're in some Python internal system thing. Then, yes, parameter hints I think are important. So if you're inside a function and want to know how to call this function, there you can search with the command palette for trigger parameter hints, and it shows you how you can call this function. That's something I use quite a lot. Then renaming, of course, is also nicely possible in Visual Studio Code. I would suggest to first use find all references. So you see wherever this is used to be sure that you can safely rename it with F2 afterwards and rename it safely without disrupting other parts of the program. Okay. Then Visual Studio Code has a terminal integrated down here, and it's possible to collapse it. And on the top of the window, you see kind of this different bars. So you can click on this with the panel down and you have it back, the terminal. But of course, you can also look for the keyboard shortcut. If you search for focus terminal, you also have a keyboard shortcut for that to jump to there or back to the editor. And now let's go to the next part, to the extensions, because Visual Studio Code is really built around its extension ecosystem. So opening the slide. So what Microsoft did is it built a really flexible framework around extensions, and nearly all of the functionality that VS Code has can be customized, like keyboard shortcut can be customized by extensions, the themes, the icons which show up for files, how different languages behave, everything can be customized. And these extensions, they developed in TypeScript and JavaScript, which makes it quite approachable to a large developer community. So that's why there's a lot of people able to develop these extensions. Then Microsoft built an extension marketplace with free and paid extensions. And you can also see how many downloads and stars the extensions got. So that's quite nice to choose from. And there are paid extensions, but also really high quality free extensions. So for my things, I'm perfectly fine with only using free extensions. Okay, oops. Going back to VS Code, I want to show some extensions now interactively. Like, I think Git is very important, but you will probably hear a lot more about Git in the next talk, so I will try to keep it short. But what VS Code already supports out of the box is you have a source control tab there, which is quite nice. You see the different files here for the README. I can see the changes that I did previously with editing. I can say, okay, I like these, I stage these changes, then write a commit message and commit, and that's it basically. So it's quite simple to use and straightforward. Then I want to highlight a few extensions for Git. Additional ones like Git Graph, I think is really useful. Git History I like, and Git Blame. There are others, so a lot of extensions probably have similar functionality, but those are the ones that I prefer. So for Git Graph, if you're in the source control tab, you can click on the View Git Graph button here, or down in the status bar, you can also find Git Graph. If you click it, you see the branches of your repository, but that's not very interesting here. Let's skip to a different repository I've opened, because there's a lot more happening. So there are 2 parallel branches. Then there were some automatic online pull requests for that repository. So there's more happening, and you can visually see it nicely. But this Git Graph isn't only for visualizing. You can also click on things. So if I click on the commit, I can see the files that have changed, the commit message and things. I can click on something on the file. I see the changes which were made inside the file. So that's quite helpful to inspect. And also, I can just right click on a commit, have a lot of options. For example, checkout. And I'm at this other commit, which is now here highlighted with this bubble, that I'm now at this commit. Or I can jump back to the main branch. So it's super easy and convenient for me, at least, to navigate Git repositories. Then, yes, going back to this file, for example, then there's Git Blame. I have the extension Git Blame, so I see down in the status bar who changed the current line my cursor is at, and when did he change it. So I see that only I myself changed this file, and here 1 year ago, 4 years ago. So yes. And if you want to know more about the changes of the current file, there's the extension Git History. I have it with the button is here to the top right, view file history, and you see all changes that were done to this file over the time. Click at it, get more information. I'm not using it so often, but when I need it, it's very convenient. Okay, so I think that's it with the Git things. And yes, so I think it is very important. So please listen closely to the next talk as well. Okay, next things I want to show is remote development. So there, let's go to the extension tab. I can also type here extensions, and I'm at the extensions tab, or to the left, there's this extensions sidebar you can click it. And I want to search for remote development. There's this extension pack by Microsoft and those remote extensions, they have a theme to them. So they always work in the way that there's a VS Code server installed on a remote machine, and then you connect to it. And to you, it looks like you're working on your local repository, but in fact, you're working on a remote machine where you're connected to. So that's really convenient to work with clusters or cloud computing or a powerful machine somewhere. And so what I was just talking about now is basically the remote SSH extension. And after that's installed, it works by searching the command palette for SSH. You can connect to host or add a new host. And via the IP address or a name, you can, after you log into the host, VS Code service automatically installed there, and you can continue working like locally, but you're on the remote machine. Then for WSL, I will quickly show it. That's basically for Windows users who want to use an Ubuntu environment. So there's WSL. I can just reopen the current folder in WSL, select the distribution. I want Ubuntu. And now instead of, takes a little bit to load, but now instead of PowerShell, I have a bash down here. And I'm working in my WSL Ubuntu environment, which is shown down here at the left status bar. To go back, I will reopen the folder back in Windows. And then I'm back to the previous environment. And the last extension I want to show of the remote extensions is dev container, because I think that's very helpful for sharing a code environment. So what dev container does is you have a Docker file and you can share a Docker container with other people easily. So how that works is if you create a .dev container folder and a dev container.json file, you select which Docker file to use. It's this one next to there. I just created a simple Docker file which uses a Python image. And what that does is I can use the dev container extension, reopen in container. It now starts a Docker container in the background and reopening the currently opened workspace with the same files in this Docker container down there. And if I share this .dev container file with other people in the repository, they get the same environment as I have. So there should be a Python available, yes, in the version that we have in the Docker file. Then, yes, so I think that's everything about remote containers. Especially the last one I think might be quite helpful. So let's go to the next category, AI extensions. So I started with GitHub Copilot when it was free for academia. I had it for 1 year, then it wasn't free anymore. So I switched to Codium, which is currently free. And I think they want to keep the base edition free or something like that. But it's quite nice to use this AI auto-completion tools. To show it, I will jump back to the local folder, not in the Docker container. So, okay. And I will open this file again. So what I previously did is I wrote these 2 comments. And from these 2 comments, the autocomplete created this whole file. So I didn't really write it. And so it's quite convenient, for example, if you don't know a language well, or if you want to do something a lot of people have done, then the AI autocomplete will help a lot. But it does a lot of mistakes. So the details, it sometimes gets wrong. You always have to understand your own code. It's just to help you get the direction, I would say, or for a faster autocomplete. For example, it gives me also the option here to generate a docstring. And then it tries its best to come up with a reasonable docstring for this function. I can accept it. I think this might be especially helpful if you have or it should fine-tune the docstring as well to your repository, because it reads your repository, fine-tunes itself to it, so it might be, after a few docstrings, be more consistent to your formatting, for example. Okay. Then the next section, so language extensions are quite important. So I would say two are the most important, which is auto-formatting and which is linting. So let's first start with linting. If I have a syntax error, it will immediately show me that there's something wrong, and that's the linter who does this. Yes, that's basically the job of the linter. And then auto formatting, I think it's also quite important to have a consistent style. So if I add a few tabs there or a few extra spaces, and the file doesn't look pretty anymore and might be more confusing. And then if you have a formatter installed, format document is a command I should be used often, I think, and it brings it back how it should look like. There are ones which are stricter or less strict, but of these formatting rules, but I just kept the basic setting. And for example, for Python, I think the rough extension is currently the best one, which is written in Rust, is super fast and has all the linting and formatting features required, I think. For Python, there's also more extensions which might be important from Microsoft, like debugger and basic extensions. Then to go to another language, to Bash. A lot of people write Bash scripts or have to write Bash scripts. And I think two extensions I would suggest for using with Bash, which is shell check. So that's a linter. It will warn you if you do syntax errors or if you have uncommon or outdated syntax, which might be dangerous, it will warn you. Then shell format to have a consistent formatting. So those are the two I would suggest for Bash. Then there's also for most languages a lot more extensions. I will quickly show that in the different repository because I mostly program in Julia. And there the Julia extension brings a lot of features like interactive debugging. You can create breakpoints. Then there's a testing extension. I think in Python, those are all available as well. So there's a testing extension. I can run only individual tests without rerunning the whole test suite. And what else is there? There's a variable explorer. So I see there's an interactive Julia shell running there. So I see the variables which are loaded, can add a new one. Some typos there, but you see it appears in the workspace. Okay, there's a Jupyter extension. I haven't used that myself because there's also these Jupyter notebooks, but might be helpful. Yes, and then let's come to my favorite extension, but I'm a bit biased because we developed the extension for this. So NeView is, Tui also already mentioned it before. The original NeView library was created by Chris Warden, and he works on the base library. And what we did here is to create an extension out of it. So I can show you what it does. I will switch to the other repository again. I created a folder with some brain images. It shows a little brain icon next to them. And if you click on them, they are opened here in a quick viewer. Enhanced DICOM file, NRD file, and many more. What it also supports is 4D time series, so you can switch between the echoes or time points, or you can view them with a timeline of the voxels visible down there. Yes. And other features are you can select multiple files in the Explorer on the left side, click New View Compare, and they will open next to next. If they have the proper header information, they will be, the crosshair will be at the same position spatially. Then from here, you can open DICOM folders. So opening DICOM folders does not work in the left Explorer, but it works by selecting a DICOM folder here. And what's really nice is it works also with a remote connection. So if you have your VS Code set up to work on a remote machine, you can still just browse the images like they're locally on your machine. Yes, it works on meshes as well. So here's a mesh. We can select an overlay and have an overlay with a mesh. So that's basically a quick viewer in VS Code. It's of course not as powerful as ITK Snap, but it's really nice to have it directly in VS Code. One small additional feature is sometimes in projects I was working with, people were saving things to raw files. So without any header information, just the plain binary data. And there's also, if you open those with NeView, NeView lets you enter the basic header information here. Like, I know the resolution is 58 times 58 times 21, and it's a float, and it can also show it. But that's kind of a hack here. Okay, I think I will be getting close to the end. I think 3 more extensions I want to show, which is Peacock, which might be quite nice to use. So what it basically does is if you have multiple VS Code windows open or projects at the same time, you can give each a different color to tell them apart. Just a nice little thing, or rainbow, CSV. If you work with CSV files, a quick highlighting to keep the columns together by color, or compare folders. I think I've only used that once, but then it was really useful. I had 2 different folders, which were basically the same, but some changes, and it shows nice difference views for those 2 folders. So that's it with the extensions. One last thing I want to show how to open VS Code, because there's multiple options from the terminal. If you type just code, it will open a new VS Code session. Or if you type code in the path, it will open this folder like code point. It will open the current folder. And here it jumps back because it's already opened. Let's close it. Code point. It will open in this folder. Then what we can do is code and close that one and close this one. Sorry. And give a path like to this simple Python file, and it will take the recently opened editor and open this file. Or of course, I could also open one of those image files, which Visual Studio Code opens and knows the extension is required to open it. So it also works from the command line, quite nice. And that's it for the VS Code introduction. I will jump back to the slides to wrap it up. Okay, so those are the extensions I talked about. Remote development, quite useful. Git extensions, then NeView, AI code help, Copilot or Codium, a formatter and linter specific for the language. There are so many available, so every language should be covered. Then Jupyter extensions or other helpful extensions. And please, if I missed anything which you think are really helpful, write it to the chat. Then next slide. So Visual Studio Code, to sum it up, Visual Studio Code is really powerful, gives you a lot of customization options. I didn't show it, but actually you can change all the keyboard shortcuts directly from selecting it when you click on the search bar. Then next to it, you can click on the small wheel to change the keyboard shortcut to adjust it to your needs. And yeah, it has great language specific features, this powerful search bar. Here's a list of shortcuts which I found most helpful and use them often. And there's also good resources available online. For example, this is a short intro video with some explanation, and it's just really short, telling the basic steps on how to use VS Code effectively from Microsoft. Okay, so that's it with my talk. Thank you for listening.